Hi, I'm Micah Clark with the American Family Association. Thank you for joining us this week. Today I'm going to use notes, which I don't often do, but I want to talk about, I've talked about a lot of bills over and over again, and I'll do that as we wind down the legislature. We've got about a week and a half left. They're trying to get out of session March 8th. But today I just wanted to talk about a few issues I have not brought up before on these videos. I think I brought one of these up in the weekly email that we do. But I wanted to talk about some issues that are kind of in our realm, but on the outskirts. Not that we're not interested in these issues, but I haven't talked a lot about them, but I know they're making some media attention. Maybe you've heard about a few of these. So I wanted to just address, I think I've got 5 bills here today that I haven't talked about previously that you might find of interest. First of all, one that was kind of hot this week, I got a lot of emails about this. There was an article in the Federalist. If you don't read that publication, it's outstanding. There's a lady there from Indiana that we've had on the show before by the name of Joy Pullman. Joy does great work, but she talked a lot about a bill, and the media picked up on this as well. And that's House Bill 1265. Now, that's an election bill. And when it went over to the Senate, they added an amendment. It surprised everyone. Strangely, we don't know who offered this amendment, which is a little unusual. But it wasn't reported in the media. Not sure who did it, not sure their intent. But the way it was picked up in the media, and I think it was probably somewhat accurate, was it looked like an attack on Attorney General Todd Rokita. As you know, Todd has gotten a lot of flack. I believe the establishment, if you want to call it that, a big chunk of those folks in the State House would just prefer that the Attorney General be nothing more than the governor's lawyer. But Todd and Curtis Hill before him were both very active in addressing national issues and joined lawsuits and joined with other states' attorney generals on a variety of issues, and that makes some of the people in the State House nervous. But I appreciate how Attorney General Hill and Todd Rokita, current Attorney General, have spoken out for issues and values so well. But House Bill 1265 had an amendment added to it that would have made it, or looked to have made it, difficult for Todd to run for re-election if there was a disciplinary hearing against him, which is happening. You know, when you stand for something, you get attacked a lot, and the pro-abortion left has gone after him on some abortion issues, and there's a possible fairly minor disciplinary hearing. So I had a lot of people ask me about that. Well, I want to let you know that this week, that amendment that was adopted in committee that looked like an attack on Attorney General Rokita was removed in the Senate on the floor. That section was deleted from 1265. So if you see that article floating around from the Federalist, or maybe some alerts from other people, that issue's been cleared up. And under law, if an attorney loses their law license, which is very significant, they can't be Attorney General. This was nothing like that. This was if there's a disciplinary action and something's filed against him and he loses law license for maybe 30 days for something. It would probably, had this become law, probably would have made the left in this case more hostile, more complaints filed in a way to silence or to get rid of our Attorney General. So that has been removed. I know a lot of people ask me about that from 1265. Now, another bill I want to mention, and in no particular order, but a bill that I mentioned in an email a long time ago was Senate Bill 234. Another bill that's moving through the process. And what this does is it limits the governor's emergency order powers. If you think back to COVID, we had emergency orders. We were under a state of emergency in Indiana for well over a year. And there were a lot of people who were upset about that, what that meant. And so they wanted the legislature to kind of rein in that excessive use of power and that emergency under COVID. So this bill would have limited the governor's ability to declare an emergency to 30 days. It came out of the Senate that way, but this week it was changed, and the media is saying it was weakened. I don't know if it's terrible, but what it says now is that the governor can do a 30-day emergency order, and then he can do a second 30-day emergency order, but then it stops and the legislature must be brought in. Before it was just one order. They're now allowing him to do 2 orders, or her in the future, 2 orders back to back, so they could do a max of 60-day emergency order, and then the legislature has to approve any emergency order. So it does restrict the governor's powers currently, but not quite as much as this bill as it was originally filed. So that's Senate Bill 234. Another bill that's gotten some media attention this week, and by the way, 234 is in the House. The House made that change. I expect that bill to go to the governor now. He may or may not sign it. He may not like having his hands tied a little bit, but I think the legislature would probably override that veto. It only takes a simple majority to do that. But we'll see what he does when that reaches his desk. Another bill, 1235, House Bill 1235, which is in the Senate, has gotten some media attention this week. Many people don't know, but for 24 years, the city of Gary has had a lawsuit against firearms manufacturers. And these are civil lawsuits that would damage firearms industries, put some companies out of business possibly. That's been an ongoing lawsuit for 24 years. And under Indiana law, a city cannot further restrict the Second Amendment than what the state says their regulations are on the Second Amendment. So in accordance with that, this bill cancels that lawsuit, ends that lawsuit, puts an end to that after 24 years. And the city of Gary, if this becomes law, that lawsuit would be dead. So I know that's an issue some people have asked about for the Second Amendment, and that's House Bill 1235. Another bill is Senate Bill 281. This is a sanctuary city bill. It's not phrased that way, but that's the easy way to understand Senate Bill 281. It's moving through the process. It's in the House. What it does is it requires local government or even universities to comply and to cooperate with federal immigration authorities. So it would remove the ability of a city to ignore ICE enforcement or immigration department laws and regulations. It basically prevents them from being a sanctuary city, whether they declare themselves that or not. And that's Senate Bill 281. It passed both chambers on a party line vote, meaning all the Republicans voted for it, all the Democrats voted against it in both chambers. That should be headed to the governor's office pretty soon. That's Senate Bill 281. The last one I want to mention is House Bill 1084. This bill's in the Senate now. It's moving through. It's actually passed both chambers. And what it says is that a government entity cannot make a list of firearms sales information. So if you go to a gun store or you go to Cabela's and you purchase a firearm for hunting or for sport or for self-defense, protection of your home, the local government there or the state government cannot keep a list of people who buy firearms and then use that for whatever purpose they might use that for, to know who owns firearms. I think there's a security risk to this too. If there's a list of who owns firearms, that can be used in all sorts of ways for home robberies or who knows what if the wrong people got that list. But it simply says the government entity cannot keep lists like that for whatever purpose. I mean, obviously the federal government knows through the federal firearms background check who purchases firearms when they clear a person to make sure they have no criminal history. But local governments or activist groups should not have lists of who owns a firearm. That's a private matter. It's a Second Amendment freedom issue. So that bill will go to the governor's desk pretty soon as well. And that's House Bill 1084. Well, I just wanted to cover those because those are some bills I hadn't talked about a lot. This week we did deal with the issues I have talked about in the past. Senate Bill 17, age verification for minors with adult websites, pornographic websites, passed the House on Wednesday. That was in my weekly email about that bill, but we didn't have the vote yet. It passed the House on Wednesday, 91-1. So that's a good thing to protect children from matter harmful to minors. So we have some positive things happening this week. I know I can be negative sometimes. It's always easy to focus on things you wish the legislature would do, like parental rights or educational transparency on sex education or a list of other things. But we do have some good things going through. And of course, we'll wrap that up in our last two videos on the session. We'll cover some of the good things that happened. And those things happened because you support the American Family Association of Indiana. Your prayers, your financial gifts, and your calls to legislators make a big difference. When I go testify, and people have called on an issue that I'm going to testify on, it makes my voice much stronger when legislators have heard from you about important issues. So you can still track what's going on in the Indiana General Assembly at iga.in.gov or Google Indiana General Assembly, and you can look on there and find out any bills that are alive. You can track the votes. You can see how your legislator voted, what's happening with those. And again, this week was the last week for committee hearings. Next week they will do final votes on second reading, which is what is floor votes, and then final votes on bills. And then you'll have this weird process I'll explain next week of conference committees. But that's where the House and Senate work out differences between the changes in two bills. If a bill goes through both chambers and it's not changed, it automatically goes on to the governor's office. If a bill goes through both chambers, and let's say it's House Bill 1001, it goes to the Senate, and the Senate makes a couple changes to it. If the House agrees to that, they can concur, and that will go on to the governor's office. Or they can file a dissent motion. A dissent motion will put that bill into a conference committee where members from both chambers, House and Senate, will get together, and they'll work out the differences between the two changes. And that's not a bad thing. And the reason that's done is so the House and Senate, they'll vote on it again so that the House and Senate vote exactly on, exactly on what is going to the governor. You don't want one chamber voting on one thing, another chamber voting on another, and then the governor signs it. It allows both chambers to vote on the exact same bill and say, we agree to these changes, and it goes on to the governor. Now, that process is also very risky at times, I guess. It's difficult for me as a lobbyist to watch those things because at that time in a conference committee, portions of other bills that may have died can be put into that if they passed one chamber. So it's a very fluid time when bills can change very rapidly. So it's intense in that we have to watch these bills and make sure they're not changed detrimentally before they go on for final conference committee vote and then on to the governor. So I'll explain that more next week. I know that's a little confusing, but next week I'll talk about that quite a bit more when we're in that process. But again, thank you for joining us today. I hope that was somewhat clear on the process. If you have questions, feel free to email me. But again, I appreciate you watching these videos, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Again, I'm Micah Clark with the American Family Association of Indiana.